Hi, thanks for joining me today on Mr. Dyer's Musings, HonorableOutfitters.com, as we take a look at an old antique camp stove. Before we get started, I want to extend my appreciation for you checking this channel out. If you like antiques and old stuff, then this is definitely the channel for you. I suggest you, after this one, you take a look at my various playlists and my other videos. I think you really dig it if you like this kind of stuff. I also want to give a shout out to my patrons on Patreon. I really appreciate their support. It's because of their support, this channel has been able to go as long as it has and where it's going to go in the future. So if that's something you want to help out with, even drop $1 or some change, we really appreciate it. So really quick, you're probably familiar, if you go camping, with this stove here and this style of tank. Now, if you're a more contemporary camper, like pretty new, you're probably more familiar with the propane stoves that either use the small propane bottles or the ones that use with a 20-pound propane tank. But before this style stove, there was this old girl and this one here. Now, I've shown this one in another video. This is a backpacking stove, so if it's just you, one person, this one can get you by if it really needs to. But if you're going with a camping, or if you're going with family, or maybe you got more people that you're going with, or maybe you just like a little bit more comfort, then this stove is more your style. All right, so this little stove is a base model of a camp stove. You know, it's bare bones. This is as simple as you could get. And it was made in the 1920s by the American Gas Machine Company. I had to think about that. It was founded in 1896. And that's important to note. That time period was exploding with innovation. You're talking about the Gilded Age, or the second American Industrial Revolution. There's all these big players that's living at that time, right after the American Civil War. They're developing new technologies, and the industry is good, economy is pretty good until, well, there's a Great Depression in the late 1800s too. That puts a kink into some things, but then it quickly recovers and leads into the 1920s, all right? So what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about petroleum, the use of petroleum, and how it was gathered from the ground, which before it was very expensive and there was a lot of waste of the petroleum to recover, all that oil. You know, and then it had to get shipped, it had to get refined, and then it had to get shipped to other places and packaged, which is very different from today. You know, today, of course, we have to refine it and things, but it was common, or it's common now, just to be able to go to a gas station and get gas. Back in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, that's not how you did it. You tend to buy cans, like square metal cans for the gas. And also you have other industries that are competing with gas companies, especially electricity. Electricity in the early 1900s, late 1800s was just being developed and marketed by Thomas Edison. And you had Tesla, and it was like a phenomenon. So right away, you have two industries, the gas and electricity, that are competing against each other for the American consumer on how you're going to light your house. How are you going to fill up your oil lamps, or how are you going to wire it so it can be switched on and off with electricity. So you have Edison and you have Rockefeller going at it, boom, bam. Those are two names that come up during this time period. Well, you have the American Gas Machine Company in Minnesota. They're seeing this revolution in petroleum and refining, and people are starting to buy into that a little bit more, and they're capitalizing on it. This company makes more than just camp stoves. In fact, camp stoves was kind of a market that comes in the early 1900s, not the late 1800s. And we'll get into that here in a moment. But before that, they were focusing on actual stoves for your kitchen, or even lanterns, or even other machines for the for the household for you to use. So those types of conveniences. Now, as we shift into the early 1900s, you know, we have a different situation that they adapt to very quickly, by the way, and that is cross-country or camping. camping in general, the camping craze and motoring craze. Henry Ford, also a name during the Gilded Age, he didn't invent the automobile, but his practices, it led to the cheap production of vehicles, so your average person could finally afford it. Before that, only the wealthy and higher middle class could afford a car. So that led to people wanting to get out and travel. You have interstate system that's starting to be developed, better roads because of the automobiles, and you have the labor movement of the early 20th century that also, to an extent, allowed some people who were restricted to working all the time and not a lot of vacation time or free time to finally be able to use their time to get in a car and travel. You have a lot of reunions from World War I and also the American Civil War, and you have the Spanish-American War that's going on. You have fraternal organizations that's around that's also promoting the travel. So it's just an awesome mix of all these period things coming together and creating this opportunity for companies like the American Gas Machine Company to capitalize on travel. All right, so if you've found this interesting so far, if you found this video useful, before we dive in and I change the angle, go ahead and click the like button for me. I really appreciate it. Other people who may be interested in this topic or are looking for how to operate an antique stove, they'll be able to find this a lot easier, or even the history of it. So click that like button. I sincerely appreciate it. I'm going to change this real quick. I'll be right back. Thank you. So you'll see here that there is a button, and there's one on each end. That's what you're going to press to open the lid. This lid is designed for the stove to actually sit on, so that if any fuel or if it's soggy ground, then the stove's not going to sink in. This has the very basic grate that goes on top. And you have your pump. What's really neat about this pump is that it unscrews on the one end and it exposes the hose that goes to it. And you flip it over, you screw that end there. And this end with the leather gasket, that's what you're going to use to connect to your tank and pump it up. Also came with the funnel. So one thing you might notice, especially if you collect these types of stoves, this is a knob that I adapted. I couldn't find a original knob that I could replace, and when I bought the stove, it didn't come with the knob. So I kind of jerry-rigged this together, and it works just fine. On the inside, you'll see it has a key. Now that comes out the side like so, and that's what you're going to use to turn on the second burner. But you want to make sure it's turned off before you do that. I'm going to flip it around. Okay, I'm going to move this and show you the tank and how to pump it. Okay, so this is the valve that you would connect that pump to air it up and add the pressure, but it also has a hex nut here. So if you got one of these stoves and you want to refill the tank, you actually have to take a wrench. Mine didn't come with the original wrench, so I just have another adjustable wrench for that case. You want to fill the tank up 3/4 full. That'll make sure that you have the right pressure and you have plenty of fuel and things like that. It makes things a lot easier. When you pump it, you're going to turn the knob halfway, like so, and you're going to set it up. So once you have your tank setting up, you want to make sure that the valve is closed all the way. So make sure to turn that off, and it would be, let's see, gotta think about that. It would be turned to the right, and then left is going to release the pressure through the stem. Okay, so turn it to the right, make sure it's good to go. Turn the check valve about one turn. Excuse me. Hook up your pump with the screw, and you're going to pump it 12 times. 10 to 12 is what the instructions say. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And before you take the hose off, go ahead and tighten it back down. What I do is I unscrew it from the pump at that point. That way I can hold the check valve here with my left, and then I can use my right hand to unscrew the hose so it doesn't release the pressure. All right, that's all pumped. You're going to move your tray here. That's what your stove's going to set on. And inside the stove, you have 4 legs, at least on this model. Now, there are several different types of legs for the various Camp Cook models, but this one, see if I can get one out really easy, has these really simple L-shaped legs. They're ingeniously in a little tube, and they just kind of rest on a hook or a rest. So you're going to lift that up, push it down. You're going to do that with all 4. Now this metal body is very flimsy. It's very, very thin gauge, but that makes it a lot lighter. Now once you have the legs pushed down, you're then going to use your finger and move the legs towards the back or the front of the stove. And there's another, not a rest, but a latch, so that the weight of the stove actually pushes down and holds the legs in place. There's that one. So now you can see the legs going up and down, and then you turn it, and then you push up, and it latches. All right, so once you have the legs out, you're ready to go. You can go ahead and put that in the metal tray. You can take your key out if you're going to use that second burner. Now, I'll tell you right now that the right burner, the one that's feeding from the tank first, that's always going to be your stronger burner. This is your secondary burner, and it's really good for keeping things hot or simmering. But as you adjust the nozzle, this one's always going to be weaker because that's how the gas flows. Okay, so now we're ready for the one thing that's extremely different from your contemporary stoves. There's a little divot here, like a cup, and this main burner here. You're going to fill it up, and you don't want to put too much because white gas is more powerful than the historical petroleum gas that was put in cars in the early 1900s. White gas burns hotter, and it's just more efficient. So it doesn't need quite as much. So you don't want to get a bunch of gas all over the stove because that's just more gas that you're going to be burning for no reason, but it's also not going to do you any good because this is where you want your gas, in this cup alone. When you put this in and light it, the gas here is actually going to heat up this line. So as you turn the nozzle, after this is burned down, and you'll see, it vaporizes the fuel. So then as it enters this and goes through, it's just vapor that's coming up. It's not anything liquid. You don't want the liquid in. That's not what you really want to burn. You want to burn that vapor. So we're going to turn the knob just enough to fill it up. Once you have it filled up, that's when you want to insert that part. You're going to let it rest. Now you want to light it. I would suggest you either use a really long match or one of these contemporary lighters because this fuel is so reactionary, you'll go poof, and it can be kind of dangerous and it can scare you. So there you go. You're going to let that burn completely out. All right, now that it's completely out, we can go ahead and we can light it for sure. So I'm going to turn the knob. There we go. Now you can turn it up. Now you want that blue flame right there. That blue flame tells you that everything's working like it should. If you're getting any yellow, that just means it hasn't heated up enough. But that blue flame is perfect. And we can feed it more gas. We can turn it down. If you hear it starting to sputter, that means there's not enough pressure in the tank. So you should really shut it down and go ahead and pressurize the tank and then restart it. Now if you want the secondary burner here lit, you've got the key, you're going to turn that on. And there you have it. You may want to feed it a little bit more gas. But now you're ready to cook. You can put the grate on, like so. Grab your favorite kettle, and you can put that on and start cooking. Now, because this doesn't have the windscreens on it, this particular model is very susceptible to dealing with a lot of flare-ups and things like that. So, again, this is the base model. You really want this to be in an enclosed area, obviously with windows open if you're inside a building or something, or a tent or something like that. That way it's going to protect you from the wind if it's a windy day. If it's a super windy day, you're going to be fighting with it and keeping it lit and making sure that the burners are working as well as they could be. All right, so I hope you've liked this so far. Now it's time to pack it away. So what are you going to do? The first thing you want to do, this key on the side here, that's the first burner that you want to turn on. And this will be your second burner. Because what that's going to do is going to make sure that any leftover gas is burned off. So go ahead and then you turn that down. You want to make sure that it extinguishes its light. Wait a few seconds, it doesn't take very long. Once the burner stops flickering and fluttering and things like that, I like to go ahead and check just to make sure to get any residual gas burned out. Okay, once it's done, you can then remove the tank. You want to make sure that you're careful with this part right here because this is going to be really hot. And you're not going to be able to put it away for about 5-10 minutes depending on how hot it is. You definitely want to use your best judgment and let the circumstances dictate it. But the check valve that's here, you're going to turn that while sitting up, straight up and down. That way it doesn't spurt out everywhere. So you're going to get a little bit of spurting that comes out, but it shouldn't be that much. There you go. It's bubbling. Once it does that, you can go ahead and close it back up. You want to make sure to release the pressure. That's just good practice for any of these old type stoves, whether it's this one or the one that uses the more common red tanks or anything that's going to be a pressurized tank. Now propane is completely different because for that you just take the bottle and you pack it away. But these type of tanks, you want to release the pressure. That's going to make sure that your stove is going to last for a lot longer than what it would if just left alone, especially In the winter, you're going to have the liquid fuels that's going to compress because it's a liquid, right? Cold temperature, things tend to compress. And in the summer, warm months, it's going to expand. And that's not going to be very good for your tank or any of these joints. So just do yourself a favor and do the next collector a favor and release the pressure. And if you're storing it away over winter or over a long period of time, then it's best to just completely empty out the tank. You can use the same funnel and put it back in your gas can for next time. Yeah. Okay. Once it cools down, you just do the exact opposite that you did to set it up. So you're going to take out the grate. You're going to put away the feet. And you can set it on the ground. You want to lift up the little legs. You're going to twist them so that they fall on the catch. I've got a stubborn leg. Make sure it's cool to the touch. Then you can put your tank in, your funnel. Make sure to put away your pump and the hose. Now this is the original hose, and it just blows my mind that it's lasted that long. Now, there's certainly deterioration there, but I think if I take care of it, it'll continue to last a long, long time. Grate on, and then you pop the lid back on. Now you have your camp cook ready to go. Be stored away to your next adventure. If this video was useful to you, again, if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and click like, maybe consider subscribing. Check out my other videos, especially the one about my backpacking stove or any of the others. I even have Civil War videos if you check those out. I have a vintage campcraft playlist, so if you like antiques and vintage campcraft, check that one out as well. If you have any questions or comments or stories, please leave them below. I love to hear from you guys. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I'll see you guys next Sunday. Take care.